And welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. Merry Christmas to all of you. This is many reasons to be grateful. I am privileged to have as my co-host Emery Moina. He is now graduate student, graduated in biology and a creationist and a Christian. Praise God for that. A long-awaited day, many dedicated hours. So I'm figuratively speaking, breaking out the champagne. Now, we've had so many bottles of this in our house, and we usually don't drink it. In fact, a Christian grandmother was helping me, and her husband were helping me clean up the house. She saw the champagne. She said, "I want you pouring that down the drain." I'm like, oh man. I mean, it's like maybe I kept a few bottles, and I actually, what I did, I said, okay, I'm gonna have fun while she's here. I'll just show, just as a gesture of goodwill, because she's been very kindly to me. I opened the bottle, and just like in the baseball, I just poured it over my head. I said, and then I took a swig of it, just used it like mouthwash and spat it out. I said, there, just tried to, God bless her. I didn't want to offend her, but I got away with keeping some bottles myself, and you can see obviously it's unopened. And let's see what the date is. Oh, this is probably at least 10 years old, maybe older. And sometimes champagne doesn't last that long. So Emery, you are the star of the hour, sir. You're the man of the hour. Whatever's on your mind, brother.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really didn't expect anybody to throw me a party when I graduated. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I'm trying to check the date of this.
All right. Yeah, no, I really was not expecting anybody to throw me a party when I graduated. So thank you for that. Greatly appreciated. Although I don't drink, so the champagne is wasted on me. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's done and over with. I'm now kicking myself in the head because apparently I like torturing myself and looking for PhD schools. If anybody has like $100,000 they want to donate to a PhD, to a poor graduate student to go get his PhD, come talk to me. No, I'm just kidding. I spend your hard-earned money somewhere else. But PhDs are not cheap. So I'm kind of looking around to see what I can find online. Because obviously I'm working full time, I don't have the money to go and just, go take a PhD program somewhere. I just don't have the money for that. So, okay. So, Godzilla, I nuked it for several reasons. One of which being a lot of the quality of material was not very good. Between the audio and video quality just wasn't very good. So I'm going to end up re-recording a bunch of stuff and putting it back up. I'm also going to split culture from science. So I'm going to have 2 channels. One's going to be cultural stuff. The other one's going to be just pure science. Just so I think it'll be better for targeted audiences. I'm sure the culture channel will do better than the science channel, but that's neither here nor there. But so that's the plan with that. I've gotten some new equipment as well, some upgraded equipment. Also, I kind of wanted to take my face offline, because if I go for a PhD program, going for a master's was one thing. Going for a PhD is a whole other level of difficulty. And it's conceivable they might go looking me up, and if they connect my face to the student who shows up for video class once in a while, that could be awkward. And I was reading on one university website tonight that the university reserves the right to deny or revoke a graduate degree given on the recommendation of the graduate faculty. And you know how they treat creationists. So that was my immediate no on that university. I'm like, nope, not going there. Not going there. I'm not putting myself in that position. Not happening.
Yeah, it's gotten way more hostile, not because of creationists per se, but Christianity in general. I mean, if you don't use the right pronouns, if you're right, if you don't have the right politics, it's like they're not going. It's gotten easier for the creationists in one sense, that they're not picking on that specifically, but they've been going after the Christians, and it's worse in that sense.
Yeah, the problem is I intersect just about every negative box that they're looking for. I'm a normal white man who's attracted to women.
Real women.
Real.
Okay, we're not going there. You can call me for being
but yes,
non-PC.
And I actually know what a woman is. Which
you studied biology, you know.
Yeah, I did. I'm allowed to speak on that topic. I'm a biologist. I'm sorry. Anyways, but that's neither here nor there. I'm a Christian. I'm a conservative. I'm what we can describe probably as a fundamentalist. I check just about every negative intersection box that there is. So, Sal, you got one less intersection box. You're Asian.
Yeah, that helps a little bit. That helps a little bit, but given all the Asian hatred going out there, it's not,
probably not.
It's kind of scary. And to be, well, maybe I'll see if I have my handy dandy banner, and you might, some guys might understand what I'm trying to say here. Certain religious organizations don't like me either. I'm running this banner, and I'm not going to comment beyond that, but you can probably put 2 and 2 together. So yeah, hey, welcome to the Brotherhood of Good Guys, man. Happier, as Jesus said, happy are you when you're persecuted for my name's sake. And
yeah, I mean, I don't particularly care. I'm kind of just whatever, but I also don't want to make things harder for myself if I don't have to.
Yeah.
Once the PhD's done, I don't care who sees my face and knows my name. Whatever, don't care. But until that point, I want to have, and the thing is, as far as I know, there are no creationist universities that offer a PhD in biology. I don't even know of that many Christian universities that do, so-called Christian universities. So
and then also you would prefer not to have to travel too far away.
Right. I'm kind of stuck because I can't afford to just go. I can't afford to go to a standard PhD school because I mean, the stipend's wonderful, but the stipend, I mean, I was looking at one particular university, the stipend was $22,000 and your tuition's paid. Well, that's great, except housing and food and electricity and Wi-Fi, and you add all that stuff up, and that's pretty close to or all of that money. Now, it's great that your tuition's paid. That's great. That's fantastic. I'm glad that they grant you a tuition waiver. So it's effectively the tuition for that was about $8,500 a year. So and that was for an on-campus student. I don't know what the tuition was for the out-of-state student, but an on-campus student was $8,500 a year. So that's a $30,500 value, plus they give you health insurance, which that's all wonderful. But has anybody noticed what the inflation rate is recently? Anybody tried to buy groceries recently? Like, I buy my groceries in bulk because I'm a bachelor. I live by myself, so I can buy once a month. But I still spend $250, $300 on groceries, and I buy cheap. A family of if a family of four, they're probably spending $1,000 a month on groceries, and $22,000.
As far as
Ain't gonna cut it. Go ahead.
well, I was about to say, as far as inflation rate, one thing I'll say about that. Let's go, Brandon.
I didn't say that. I just laughed when you said it.
Now, Godzilla Freak says Sal and I get the one break of being Asian. I'm going to tell him I would have sworn you were a white guy. I really am not serious. That's what I thought. So, well, anyway, Godzilla Freak, it's thank you for visiting us. Are you taking? You're welcome to address anything in the side chat if you wish.
Yeah. I don't know what the interest rates are here. Fortunately, I bought my house before the interest rates started going exponentially insane. But we'll see. We'll see how that works. But anyway, I have seen. Okay, I'm a little skeptical of environmental DNA because that's what eDNA is. The Mastodon question. I'm a little skeptical of eDNA. I haven't read the article though, so I'd have to read it to give you a full answer on that. It's possible that there needs to be a population in Greenland in about 5,000 years ago, I think is what the article said. But I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to read the article, and of course you have to adjust the timeline because the timeline's off. But post-flood, there could have been a large population of mastodons in Greenland. That's possible.
I forgot. This is that banner was from a different stream where I gave the link. So apologies. I'm going to give the link now, and then I'll add it to the stream. So, just give me a moment. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. That is
I'm
totally
not a mod.
unreal.
Sal, I'm not a mod anymore in your channel, so I can't drop that in. Otherwise, I'd have just dropped it in for you because I know where it is. But
how did that happen? How did you get unmodded?
When I nuked the channel, it took away the channel. The channel doesn't exist anymore, so it took that out of your options. That's why.
Do you have any handle that you go by?
Well, right now the one I'm using right now is Emery Moina, and in his image does have a channel. There's just nothing there right now.
Okay, if you type in the channel, I will enable you. Oh, okay. So here you go. Here you go, Philip. Here you go. I'm just typing here for Philip. Thank you for your interest. I really cannot comment on this, which
and just for the sake of, I mean, I have things I could say about it, but just for the sake of making sure that Sal stays legally protected, I'm not going to say anything while I'm on Sal's show. My own personal commentary that may happen at some point, but while I'm on Sal's show, just for the sake of all the legalities and all that other fun stuff, I will refrain from commenting on that particular article.
Right. So part of the reason I'm posting it is people have been asking, and it's like, okay, there is public news, and
right. It's available publicly. So
Yeah.
you just
And,
people
and
ask about it, you point
yeah,
them to it, but you can't comment on it.
right. They're official court records and everything, and that's about all I could say. So if you want something to say, I'm updating this in the video description. If you want to say something else on any random topic, brother.
So I suppose I can talk a little bit about my thesis. Oh, hang on, before I do that, I'll try and answer Truth is Beautiful's question first. Population size, diversity, mastodon, mammoth, elephants, the migration lane, bridges, winter sea ice, natural rafts, swimming, human rafts. Okay, so if there were mastodons in Greenland during the early part of the ice age, would be my guess for when they would be there. I couldn't tell you for sure whether mastodons are in the elephant kind or whether they're not. That what I would suspect they are, but I can't confirm or deny that necessarily. In terms of getting them there and population size, I don't think you need as big of a population as they're talking about, because they're assuming they're making some assumptions. I'm guessing. I'm guessing here because again I haven't read the article, but I suspect they're making assumptions about starting population diversity that are probably inaccurate, because they assume low diversity at the start of a population, lower diversity than we would expect from a high diversity heterozygosity, a high amount of created heterozygosity in a flood model. So it's possible the population size is significantly smaller than they're talking about. Getting there would not have been a problem during the Ice Age. The sea levels would have been significantly lower, and there would have been fairly solid pack ice for them to walk across if they'd wanted to. So that would not have been an issue, I don't think. Getting back after the end of the Ice Age, that would have been a problem. Probably explains why they went extinct. That and probably the early settlers to Greenland, because we know it was settled relatively early, they probably just ate them. Because if you're in a cold, miserable, freezing area where you can barely grow anything, like Greenland, a mastodon is a meal for a family for a week. So you're going to go kill a mastodon because that means that you're feeding your wife and your kids for the next week. So they're going to get hunted out of existence real quick. And if there are the same kind as elephants, I would expect they'd have a similar gestation period. Elephants' gestation is something like 18 months, if I'm remembering correctly. Something stupid, ridiculous like that. So mastodon populations are not going to grow very quickly because not only is the gestation time long, but the time to maturity is long. And now, again, I'm making some assumptions that they're similar to modern elephants. But if those assumptions are correct, then I wouldn't expect the population sizes to grow very fast. And if they don't grow very fast, they're not going to handle sustained heavy hunting, which has been what the early settlers would have done to them, and probably why they went extinct would probably be my guess. That, and they probably would have been genetically isolated from all the other populations of mammoths and mastodons, and that genetic isolation plus heavy hunting may have been enough to send them into an extinction vortex. So, anyways.
Well, I finished updating the video description, and Dr. Sandy Pigeon, our resident Navy SEAL, is here. God bless you, sir. Thank you for your service to our country. And we're just hanging out, just chilling and celebrating graduation. And so, this is a big step for you. This is a giant step. So the next thing is PhD programs for both of us, God willing. And look, Dr. Joel's here. Hey, I was trying to get you a PhD program there, guy. I did ask. Just wanted to let you know I was going to bat for you there. Greetings, Dr. Joel. Oh, by the way, everybody, Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody, even Dr. Duff.
And okay, I just, just to clear my conscience a little bit, there is a segment of Christians, and even historically the Puritans, that felt it wasn't proper to celebrate Christmas. That every day is a celebration of Jesus Christ, and I get that. And some people said that Christmas was a pagan holiday. So I just wanted to set the record straight. One way we could solve this is we celebrate Jesus every day, his birth, his death on the cross, and his resurrection. And then, Paul did say some days are also, or some men treat every day the same, some have special days. Now, there may or may not be pagan roots in the affixing of the date of December 25th. And my view is, before you're saved, you probably were the temple of the devil. Now that you are a Christian, if you're a believer, you're the temple of the Holy Spirit. So just because you had some pretty bad past, Christ can redeem that. And if you want to celebrate, we have a Memorial Day that we pick for a certain, whatever. If you want it, it's just that culturally we ended up on the 25th. It may or may not have had the best of motivations to pick that particular day. But I think if you celebrate Christ, if you choose to set aside a day that you just happen to like to celebrate Christ's birth, I think that's perfectly fine. And if you just accept the cultural norms. So that's me clearing my conscience, because it does bother me that some people are saying you're a heretic if you celebrate Christmas. I think that's going too far. That's just my feelings. So Merry Christmas to everyone.
Sandy Pigeon, blame it on Constantine. Yeah, that's effectively the default go-to when it comes to the whole Christmas argument, or realistically anything else related to the biblical text or something that somebody doesn't like in modern ecclesiology. It's Constantine's fault. Somehow, it's Constantine's fault.
Well, I am a history buff, and at least officially, Christianity wasn't persecuted for a very long time. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to get on the Catholics, but Christianity was persecuted a lot within the Catholic Church, and need we say the Inquisitions, etc. But I'm trusting God has reasons for all this. One pastor who I'm not a Word of Faith proponent, but one pastor who's a Word of Faith pastor, I was really impressed with his knowledge of the Bible. He's an electrical engineer, PhD, and he started Church of the Entrepreneurs. And so a lot of his insights are really good. I just don't agree with this, some of his theology. But God can speak through all sorts of people. And he said, you know what? Don't worry about your money. You focus on what God has called you to do. Look what Jesus did. He hired Judas. He got Judas Iscariot to be his treasurer. So, all right. So we got Constantine, warts and all. It's like, all right. So God has a plan with all that.
Yeah, I'm in no way defending Constantine as a model Christian. He wasn't. He was a disaster. But that's cool. That's cool. Nice that you know that little bit of genealogy. That's always cool. But in terms of what he did, it was more along the lines of, hey, guys, we're not going to kill you anymore. And by the way, we think that we like your religion, and we're going to put your morality in charge instead of the secular one that had been in charge previously. It wasn't a good, necessarily the right solution. I'm not even going to defend that. I know probably some of my Presbyterian friends would probably jump on that and say, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what we ought to do." And no, maybe not. But I'm a Baptist. I don't agree with that. But that said, we can argue about whether that was right or not right. But for the purposes of the early church, that was great. They weren't getting killed anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it became a protected, it made it possible for the scriptures to be transmitted and Christian thought to at least hang in there until the Reformation. It's beautiful to see the name of Christ proclaimed. And as Paul said, whether out of good motivation or true motivation or not, it's great that the gospel spread. And so, yeah. Oh, by the way, can I offer a prayer?
Yes.
I forgot to open. And I'd like to acknowledge Arctic Timberwolf. He had an eye injury, and I've not forgotten about you, brother. So let's just offer a prayer. Lord, we celebrate the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ this Christmas season, and help us to be mindful to celebrate Jesus every day. And yes, we may set aside special days of dedication. And so, Lord, the important thing is not the exact day, but that Jesus was resurrected. That's the thing that counts. And Lord, there are people in the side chat. There are many needs that are reflected. We lift up Arctic Timberwolf. I lift up his eyes and any other health issues he may be dealing with. I lift up Janet Duttridge, the widow who's disabled, and she's looking to you. Please provide for her this Christmas season. Lord, there are a lot of broken hearts out there and a lot of financial troubles. And we may be, who knows how close to the brink of nuclear war that we have been or are. And I just praise you, Lord, that we're still alive, able to praise you in such comfort for many of us relative to all the people in human history and in other cultures. Thank you for the love you've lavished upon us through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And we celebrate Emery's graduation, that you got him through this milestone to be a creationist, to be at the top of his class or very close to the top of his class in his biology program. What a great witness, Lord. And may his light shine brightly to a lost world. And Lord, help him get that PhD, and he can shine even more brightly to a lost world. And Lord, just be with us this day and this Christmas season in Jesus' name. Glory and honor to you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, well, thank you for the update. And I'm really sorry to hear this, brother. May you heal. We'll keep, when I think of you, I'll say a prayer. And Sandy, it's great to see you. Thanks for dropping in. And he says, congrats and Merry Christmas. He's got a split. So,
Thanks, Sandy. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, maybe we'll run into each other again, Sandy. Look forward to seeing you. Man, time flies. So what was I about to say? We had all sorts of things that we talked about in backstage that we might talk about. So, this is your time, Emery, whatever you want to celebrate, whatever's on your mind.
About my master's thesis. I don't want to get into too much detail. It will at some point. It's going to a journal to get published. So, the way my master's program was structured, because I'm the online student, everybody says, well, you're not gonna do good research.
Oh, Emery, if I may stop you, maybe this is too sensitive information. I
can't give them very much. I can give them a little bit.
All right.
So all I can say is my master's thesis was in conservation genetics. I can give you that much. So we're looking at genetics of particular organisms and how they relate to the conservation and risk of extinction in certain populations. So that's about all I can give you. If and when it publishes, I can give you a little bit more, but not until that point, obviously, for reasons. But yeah, so It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. Goodness, I put a lot of time and effort into that thing, but it's done. It's over with, and it's approved. So, good news, department.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you, Dr.
Merry
Joel.
Christmas, Dr. Duff.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Let me just write him a letter here. When I was praying just now, let me hang on. Merry Christmas. Thanks for dropping in. That was for Dr. Joel. As we were praying and I was talking about nuclear war, I had on the academic channel, Evidence Reasons Academy, and I was remiss. I should have put a link to that. I'll do that in the when I have time. In 1962, one guy saved us from nuclear war. It was a gentleman named Arkhipov, commander. He became an admiral. Whatever his rank was, he was eventually Admiral Arkhipov. The U.S. in the Cuban Missile Crisis had set up a blockade, and they were blocking every Soviet ship from getting to Cuba. And these diesel-electric submarines of the Russians were armed with nuclear torpedoes. So even though they're diesel-electric, they were carrying nuclear weapons. And the American destroyers detected them and tried to get them to surface. They didn't have radio communication. It wasn't as sophisticated now. Plus, water blocks certain bands of the radio frequency. It's very hard to communicate through water. It can be done, but you need special equipment, which didn't exist at the time. And not to mention, it's like, well, that's kind of, there are all these language barriers and code, whatever. And so they started dropping these warning depth charges that weren't enough to blow up the submarine, but just to let them know. And so the Russian submarine thought they were being attacked, and they had 3 officers that required unanimous decision whether they're going to launch a nuclear torpedo. And the captain of the ship said, "Let's launch, arm the nukes." And the political officer said, "Yeah, let's arm the nukes. Maybe Russia's already at war." The idea was they were given instructions that if, in case communication had broken down, meaning, maybe a nuclear war had broken out, you're authorized to fire. And so they thought World War III had already started.
And instead they were in the business of signing off on starting it.
Yes. And Arkhipov said, we don't know, for one, and they're too deep to be listening to radio transmissions, so they're isolated. They're in a submarine that's had air conditioning problems, 100 degrees, and they don't know what's going on. They're getting hit by depth charges. The CO2 is building up in the submarine. They're not thinking clearly. Okay. A lot of things not going well. And Arkhipov said, I think if they wanted to kill us, we'd be dead by now. I think they're just trying to get us to the surface. If you launch that torpedo and it's not a war, what's going to happen, I think it was probably obvious to everyone that, oh boy, a nuclear weapon just went off to sink American ships like that carrier and the surrounding destroyers. The United States will probably retaliate, thinking they're getting attacked, especially since the bomb went off in Cuba. Mm-hmm. On the naval blockade. And then who's it? Khrushchev will think, oh no, the Americans are launching
nukes at us, and they'll shoot back.
Now, even though Australia probably wouldn't be targeted, we know the phenomenon of nuclear winter.
Uh-huh.
And it's possible civilization would have been wiped out. So when I was praying, I was just thinking of that anecdote. We literally have been rescued by one man, figured, really in Arkhipov, but then in the ultimate sense by Jesus Christ. I mean, guys, we ought to be getting on our knees. We need the Lord's mercy because we are so on the brink, and we have been. And these are the stories we know about now. The story of Arkhipov only came out like 40 years after the fact. We knew that the Americans knew that we forced a Russian submarine to surface, but it was after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and some declassification that the Russians finally told their side. And said, we are just one man away from firing a nuclear torpedo. So
yeah,
I'm laughing because it was such a close call. And I've had my close calls. I was reflecting with some friends. My mom had hyperemesis in a third world country. It was so bad, they said, my sisters, when she was carrying them to term, the doctor said, you should abort them because you're going to die. And mom and dad said, no. Mom said, I'd rather die for my daughters than to do that. God bless her. They were carried to term. They went on to live to be nurses. They're much older than me, 15 and 12 years older. And then when I was, she was pregnant with me, they said, oh, okay, we have a new drug. It's called thalidomide to treat. I don't know the backstory of how come my mom didn't take thalidomide. They instead gave her an IV to keep her nourished. And I was the easiest one to term. So that's one bullet I dodged. In junior high, I nearly broke my neck when I was in a backyard pool. I fell from a very high height and I tumbled and I landed on my back. I could have easily landed on my head. I might not be here, or I'd be a quadriplegic. Who knows? In high school, I had a wound on my a rocket engine I built exploded. I was in the hospital 2 days. I could have lost eyes, fingers. I didn't get hit in the eye or the finger.
The part of that Sal's leaving out is the fact that he spent the entire day with shrapnel embedded in his chest and waited till his dad got home, and then eventually told his dad he was too weak to take out the trash.
Yeah, I was, my whole front was covered with blood, and I said, I didn't know that shrapnel entered my chest. I just thought it was the concussion. I was a 16-year-old kid. I didn't know anything. So I said, I better clean up because I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah, now I was a good kid, but you always worried Sal's going to be up to something and he might kill himself or injure himself. And that was, yeah. But it embedded in my rib. If it exploded, just, the orientation of that explosion were just a little, a degree off, it would have gone into my heart and I wouldn't be here today. So I'm just offering thanks to God. And I don't know, when I was praying, I was just saying, we have a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah, we do have a lot to be thankful for.
So conservation genetics, conservation. So that means, okay. Yeah, and that was the only thing that was on my mind that I just had to say something, just totally off topic. We're shooting the breeze.
That's fine. So we do enough of these streams where I'm used to topics wandering all over the place. It's just kind of how things work.
Yeah, unless we're reading through a paper.
Yeah, that's about the only time we're somewhat focused.
Oh man, that was a lot of fun. I remember our 10 hours and 5 episodes of R.H. Brady. That was good.
Oh yes. Yes, R.H. Brady, my introduction to all the problems with natural selection.
And it's gonna keep getting worse. Now, I do want to. Can we talk about a biology-related topic?
Go for it. Let's talk biology.
Because if we get to politics, this could be. I could be
here all night, and we won't get anywhere.
Yeah. The other thing is, it is a good conversation to be talking about, where we'll host our YouTubes and social media. And speaking of which, before I forget, what do you think about Elon Musk taking over the armpit of the internet?
Well, I think it's less of the armpit since he took over. But in terms of what I actually think, I am cautiously optimistic. I mean, I think we're a lot of good is coming out of this, but Musk. I don't trust Musk completely. So
Yeah, well, I really was asking more for as far as you and I are concerned, because did you have a Twitter account? I think I had one. I never really.
I did. I deleted it a while ago because before he bought Twitter, because I got sick and tired of dealing with the armpit.
Okay, I'll tell you, there was actually a practical reason I asked this, because, and for the viewing audience too, Emery and I and lots of people, especially with our viewpoints, have been worried about being canceled, the cancel culture. And so we're looking for a new home. And, just suffice to say, I mean, I have a Rumble account. I haven't used it. And so I'm thinking about migrating at some point. We'll see. And, I don't, Twitter might be a way to advertise my channel, but I'm not really interested in increasing my subscriber base.
Mm-hmm.
I am interested in selling books and teaching classes privately. People want to enroll, that, something like that. But if you're a public figure like Hugh Ross, and I'm only, he's an old Earth creationist, I'm a young Earth creationist. It's just that I heard him say when he was speaking, he gets 1,000 emails a day. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that would, I would need a professional staff to be dealing with that many emails.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he gets enough donations to where he can afford a professional staff. If you're getting 1,000 emails a day, you're probably getting donations too. But
right.
I mean, I'm sure that's not even that's probably nothing compared to the really big Christian ministries. Like if you take, I don't know, what's a really big Christian ministry? I don't know. You take something like
William Lane Craig. I know he has a professional staff.
Reasonable Faith, yeah. Craig is I have my issues with Craig, but
I know.
But just we take someone like Ligonier, because that's a fairly big ministry. They probably get a couple thousand emails a week, maybe more.
Yeah. So where I was headed with this is, I would have to be adequately compensated for my time, not, to make it worth my while. And I'm not trying to be greedy or anything, but, I spend 1 or 2 hours.
Worthy of his hire. That's what Scripture says. If you're going to do that kind of work, you should get compensated for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's hard for me to say no to people. They'll ask creation science question, and I feel like I'm so grateful that they're interested, especially if I find out they're a Christian and a college student. I want to invest time in them, but I'm like, okay, I spend maybe 1 or 2 hours a week, trying to respond to comments and stuff. And like, if my channel grows by a factor of 20, I think I'm going to die. Because to read these emails and they're pouring their heart out, they're telling me about, this professor said this to me in class. And it's like, I feel like I need to support them. And I think they should be supported, but I only have so much gas in the tank, and I can't take care of everyone. And, it's, so that's all this to say, I'm not eager to grow my channel, but it did, sometimes it's in the back of my head. Should I advertise this with Twitter? And I keep remembering when I say Twitter, I said, Emery called that the armpit of the internet.
I think it's less of the armpit now. I mean, apparently after Musk took over, they cleaned up a bunch of the child porn. So there's at least that. But I mean, and a bunch of so-called journalists got banned for doxing last night. So they're doing keep cleaning the platform up. Keep at it. But I I'm skeptical of social media just as a general rule of thumb. I'm a little bit less skeptical of Musk than I am of, say, something like Facebook. Although I have a Facebook because when I got it, it wasn't quite as wicked as it is now.
Has it gotten really wicked?
I mean, okay, this is where Facebook's at. It's not so much wicked as creepy, because I mean, you can kind of fine tune your feed to a certain extent to stay away from a lot of the bad stuff, although you still get some ads. But the creepy part is, so I went home for Thanksgiving, and none of our electronic devices were in the room. None of my electronic devices were in the room. They were all upstairs in my bedroom I was using while I was home. And my brother told a story about a particular video that he had seen about how to appropriately butter a biscuit, because we had biscuits with our Thanksgiving dinner, and he was just teasing my mom about it because my mom was doing it the wrong way, or maybe it was my dad that was doing it the wrong way. But it was just a joke. It wasn't like he was talking about the. After he left, I pulled up my Facebook. I got an ad for that exact video. Wasn't even in the room. Wasn't even on the same floor of the building.
That is creepy.
Yeah. I've never gotten that ad before or since, but I got it that day.
Man.
So creepy is an understatement. These algorithms, they're obviously listening, and they're fine-tuning advertisements based on what we say.
Yes, and then they may have geolocated you and said, "Oh, they may have." Yeah, they may have said, "Oh, that's a family gathering." Boom.
Yep. I mean, I turn off location tracking on my phone, but they can probably still do it anyway.
Wow. Well, this is a conversation I did want to have with you because you were a YouTube channel. Well, you are a YouTube channel owner that, you're going through some migration things, and I am too. And, I don't know what I'm going to do. I do feel that I want to find an outlet for some of my publications and writings to influence the creationist world as far as their arguments, because some of the stuff that I do see is a little, that I'm seeing is naturally obsolete, and some of it needs kind of an update. And my guideline for that has been, I've noticed as I've met some of the Christians here on YouTube channels, I've been asking them how did you get converted? And what about creationism? I've been surprised how many stories I've gotten that dealt with the ID creationist arguments at the molecular and cell level. So many. And so that brand of creationism, I mean, Young Earth Circles just does not fly.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of sad. I said, I do see where a lot of the creationist stuff is. It's with geology, it's with dinosaurs. And I'm like, but where I see the people who are, who are non-believers becoming Christians, and I would presume the people that were on the fence, remaining in the faith, it's been molecular and cell biology. And James Tours really paved the way for, really showing that this is a good argument. And so that's kind of why I'm interested in doing this, because I am competing in some sense with, my creationist peers to try to get to influence business. And, I hate being competitive in that sense, but I'm just like, well, I'm being competitive not just because it's my area, specialty. I wouldn't call it expertise, but it's my specialty. But I've seen results I've seen results in the changed lives,
Mm-hmm.
and that counts for something.
Right.
I have been a little bit, some of the stuff with young earth creationism, because it's not textbook science and sometimes it gets overturned, just a little concerned what it's doing to people's faith when they realize maybe that wasn't a good argument and I built so much of my faith on it. Whereas I think the origin of life stuff, the evolution of complexity, I think that is really solid. And I don't worry about teaching that as a creationist argument. It's going to last. I think it's going to have lasting power.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, I do think there's a place for answering things that are popular in the media or popular in the science textbooks or whatever. But it's important that we go, I think, a little bit deeper than that, and I'm not saying go deeper and parrot back everything the evolutionists say, because there's a certain group of creationists out there that does that.
yes, agreed.
But I do think we need to look below the surface and just say, hey guys, let's dig into this a little bit and see what the implications actually are. And I understand a lot of creation scientists are stretched 5 ways from Sunday. They're trying to do 4, 5, 6 different things, wear 4, 5, 6 different hats. So I understand it's tough. It's tough. But at the same time, you gotta make it work. You gotta find a way to do it.
Right. And so as far as this conversation, this immediate conversation, we'll change the topic a little bit, was I'm trying to find out how I can influence the discussion a little bit, and Cindy Lincoln was my debate partner against Aaron Raw and Dr. Chris Thompson. And I've been trying to teach her the new argument. It's been it's been a little, and she knows this, I've said this publicly, that it's been aggravating because she has a lot of old creationist arguments, and some of them I thought were really bad. Really bad.
I mean, considering the circle she ran in, I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, and so I'm not repeating anything I haven't said publicly. And she said sometimes it hurts her feelings when I've done this, but it's like, well, I'm actually trying to help. So when she's trying to make a creationist argument based on the Loch Ness Monster, I'm just like, Cindy, don't go there, please. I referred her to James Tour. She said, it's really great stuff. I said, see, that's the way you should teach it. Start with something that no one's going to disagree with, like basic chemistry.
Ideally, yes, you want to, as much as possible, let the hostile witnesses make the argument for you.
Yes. And so I've been, it's been like pulling teeth, because she's been in a mode of how to argue and defend it. And I said, Cindy, and she said, but kids won't be interested in that. They like dinosaurs. I'm just like, okay, this isn't about fun. I'm trying to save their souls. Don't try to make, at least let them know they've heard it. They may be bored, but you may be really helping them. Because I'll tell you, the people that went off to college, they were atheists, they got saved. It was at the cell and molecular level. So granted, it's hard stuff, but we're getting better at being able to communicate it where you don't have to be in school 4 years. So I'm glad the Discovery Institute is spreading the message more, but I would like to see more of the creationist world emphasize this a little more. It's been the old Earth creationists that have been very good at the origin of life type stuff and some of the cellular. The young Earth creationists have been doing a lot of geology stuff, which is fine because Noah's flood's a big deal, but it's not yet. Your starting point is not textbook science, and that puts, it's a little harder at that point for someone who's on the fence. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make it more difficult.
So I guess you and I are kind of in a similar boat. It's like we're in specialized fields, and we would like to be able to share our our work a little more.
Mhm.
I'll tell you backstage who I'm at. If I remember backstage, I'll just say there's certain creationists I'd rather not. Just wish they wouldn't represent. I've already mentioned some names. I mean, some names have.
Well, there's one crackpot in particular we can mention. We won't have to take that one backstage.
So let's see. So now that I got that out of the way, I wanted to ask you if you wanted to talk about continuous environmental tracking, because I know nothing about it. It's too late. That's okay.
No. This is something I've been thinking about a fair bit. So those of you who have watched my videos and read my podcast, I've criticized, and this is not directly a criticism of ICR so much as it is a particular criticism of this particular model. It is the continuous environmental tracking model of Randy Gavuza, who's currently the ICR president.
Emery, can I get a cup of coffee?
Certainly.
I'll be able to hear you. So just keep going, and as I warm it up, I just didn't want to be rude.
That's fine. So in terms of the continuous environmental tracking model, I'm not going to go into all the details here because it's midnight my time, and I'll probably fuzz over them. Effectively, it means that organisms are constantly keeping track of their environment and making changes internal to the organism to remain best adapted to the environment. Now, this requires thinking a little bit differently than maybe you were taught biology. You probably were taught biology at the population level, hearing about things like genetic drift, natural selection, etc. Now, certain members of the continuous environmental tracking community have made the comment that natural selection degrades God. If you think that, I got news for you. No, it doesn't. Rob Carter's written an excellent article on the CMI website that talks about natural selection in paradise. You should go read that. However, I don't think that continuous environmental tracking and natural selection are mutually exclusive. I did at one point. I've walked that back now at this point. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. Because I think I've come upon a potential case study for CET that does not rule out, that also would not conflict with natural selection operating as well. Now, when Sal gets back, I'll talk a little bit more about this because I want to actually show what I'm talking about just a little bit here. When he gets back, it's not an urgent thing, but I do want to show a picture of what I'm talking about. But there is an interesting organism, shall we say? I'm not going to give anything away right now. An interesting organism that I discovered while I was sitting on a plane reading a book that I think may indicate that the two things can be fused. So most of you probably don't care about that level of biological nerd, but it's interesting to me. So you get to hear about it effectively. Let me see here. If you don't know what continuous environmental tracking is, I've kind of gone over a brief definition. I can go into a little bit more detail if I need to. Dr. Gavuza has been slowly debuting the model over the last couple of years. He's written a couple of peer-reviewed papers, and he wrote some very, very long peer-reviewed papers in the ARJ where he went after natural selection. I don't think his attacks on selection are necessarily unwarranted. I think there are problems with natural selection, at least as a universal explanation. But I don't think that it is as problematic as he makes it out to be. So essentially, I'm trying to walk a middle road, and that probably is going to make me lots of enemies. But hey, I'm used to having lots of enemies. That comes with the territory. So
my brother-in-law said, and this is about churches, and this is sadly extensible to creationism.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, I've been part of the corporate environment,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been in business, I've been in school, seen politics. He said, I've never seen the level of backstabbing and dirty dealing as I do as in the church. And whether that is an exaggeration or not, there's a lot of backstabbing in the creationist world and infighting and just ugly things going on. And, uh, so to use the word enemy, it's like sometimes that's appropriate because, there's some things, I just, I think there's room to be polite disagreement. And when I first met Randy Galusa, the first thing he said, I introduced myself. I said, I was Dr. Sanford's research assistant. And he said, I totally disagree with everything, in John's book. And he said, by the way, let me take you out to lunch. See, that was very polite. And, we just kind of walked through it. And I said, hey, we have a new publication, the Springer Nature chapter. And it was not an enemy. It's like, and I told him, I said, we were over lunch. I said, I think this is problematic. And it didn't get heated. He was very respectful, total gentleman. And I said, that's okay. We can
My
disagree.
interactions with the ICR people have been largely positive.
Yeah.
I don't agree necessarily with some of the stands they take. I don't know. I know that they've got a very high flood boundary, which I know absolutely nothing about. So I can't really commentate too heavily on that. But my interactions with the people that I've talked to from ICR have always been positive. So I have nothing against ICR. They seem to be very good people down there. I don't know much about them, but
well,
what I do know is positive.
I'm sorry. Well, not that this is going to air some dirty laundry, but I've already done it on this channel. But Paul Price, if you're listening, I think you're a scumbag.
I don't think he's with CMI anymore.
He works for Home Depot now.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, guys. He just did some things that were just not cool. I mean, well, I'll tell it. He was writing terrible things about me to my boss, saying Sal's not a creationist. He's a something on that level. It was disgusting. And I'm just so glad that, after that, I got published several times in secular peer review, and then published with Dr. Sanford. So it's like, take that, Paul. So that's what I mean by seeing some, enemy, just bad behavior. That was totally uncalled for to go after me like that. And then, of course, now with the Kent Hovind thing, the internet creationists are after me, and that's okay. But
they're irrelevant.
Yeah. But as far as continuous environmental tracking, Randy said, well, or someone said, who was in favor of it, was like, well, we need to dismantle natural selection. And it's like, well, I think the evolutionists, that was the whole point of some of the work we've been doing that I did with Dr. Sanford, Ola Hosger, and Bill Basner, is the evolutionists have kind of quietly dismantled it for you. You can
to
actually,
an extent. I mean, I am not fully convinced that natural selection is dead. I think there may be some form that is something that could be used potentially. But I will grant that there are problems with it, and I think that they need to be dealt with honestly rather than swept under the rug.
well, for Dr. Tapioca Weasel asked, what's continuous environmental tracking? And I'll just say, that's what I'm trying to figure out too.
So continuous environmental tracking, effectively, I'm summarizing heavily here, and I'm sure Dr. Galuza or anybody else from ICR, if you see this and I've summarized incorrectly, you've got my email. Shoot me an email. Tell me what I said wrong. But effectively, what continuous environmental tracking is the postulate that organisms continuously track their environment and the changes that happen around them. And as they do so, they make internal and sometimes even external changes to adapt to the environment as needed. So it's effectively some form of directed internal and external changes, phenotypic and genotypic. Now, I'm not completely on board with this. For one thing, it completely requires if you go full blown on this, you have to give up any form of population level evaluation. Everything has to be on the individual level, which I'm not fully on board with. I think population level thinking is actually somewhat beneficial, at least in some circumstances, because you need to be able to evaluate whole populations for certain things. Genetic drift, which I don't think anybody denies is a reality, is a population level metric. So, natural selection, whether you deny it or don't deny it, that there is some potential for some form of selection occurring potentially, and that would be a population level metric. Any kind of mating system, any kind of genetic studies, those would be done at the population level rather than the individual level. So you do need to have some population level maintained in your analysis. So I don't think you can go full bore down this road. But that said, I do think that it's possible for continuous environmental tracking to be at least partially real and at least partially responsible for certain I don't want to say traits, but certain individual activities undertaken by organisms that will vary from organism to organism. And to illustrate that, Sal, if you don't mind, I'm going to share screen here real quick.
Go ahead.
To illustrate that, I want to show you. Hang on, let me find the right screen on a particular window. I want to present to you Acrocephalus succulentus.
All these Latin profound sounding names, it's beautiful.
So this is, I'll give this to you in a much simpler term. This is the Seychelles warbler. This little fella was knocked down to about 50 odd, maybe less, or members of the species left alive on one island in the Seychelles island chain in the Indian Ocean in the 1960s. It's now up to close to 1,000 on several islands. They've been rebuilding the population through extensive conservation work. Now, again, remember my thesis was conservation genetics. It was not related to this particular bird. I will say that much right now. But the fact that I did a thesis in conservation genetics really helped me when I started reading about this bird. So I found this bird in a book of curiosities, various curiosities related to genetics. It was basically just a layman's level book that was meant to just introduce you to some of the weird things that go on in genetics. And I was reading it on an airplane because I was bored. And I was reading it, and I came across this guy, and I went, wait a minute. That sounds very familiar. And I immediately went and looked up Galuza's papers when I got off the plane. And sure enough, it's right there. So it turns out that mom and dad, or more specifically, mom, can decide the sex of her offspring. Mom can make a decision based on environmental conditions around her, the availability of food, the availability of open territory, etc., whether her offspring is going to be male or female. Now, this matters because males, they don't stick around. When they fledge, they leave. The males drive them off. The females, if the environment's good, they'll stick around and help raise the next generation. They're helpers. It's a common thing in birds. If the environment's good, that's beneficial long-term for the birds because more of their eggs and young will survive. If the environment's not so good, then it's harmful because they have to feed an extra mouth. So in environment where the environment isn't very good, they have the babies. They only usually lay 1, sometimes 2 eggs. The babies that they raise will be male. The eggs that they lay will be male, almost exclusively. And in the instances where the environment is good, the eggs that they lay are largely female. So that little bird is able to track the environment around it, to use Galuza's word, figure out how much food's available and what kind of environment, what the environment's like, and decide what what sex baby it's going to have based on that information. Now, I'm not a natural selection doesn't exist person, but I'm sorry. Someone please explain to me how natural selection did that. Blow it up if you can, Sal.
This is very interesting.
Mhm.
Now, you see, so you're saying the mother's doing the choosing there, not
Correct. Mom chooses what sex
choosing.
her babies will be.
Not. Well, see, the problem with the word like natural selection, it's like, well, oh, the mom's part of nature, so she's choosing. Nature's choosing. You know, that's why I've really been thinking about what to call natural selection. I think when I want to identify it as wrongly used, I'll say Darwin's theory of unnatural selection.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, no, for you to claim this is what did it, the word unnatural selection would be appropriate, more of as kind of a joke, really, and say your theory is a joke because this is not what actually happens. So you know, if we say something as complex as the eye resulted from unnatural selection, it's like, well, you know, you could say by something unnatural, that would be more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been still wrestling. I like to use, I mean, the population genetic term is differential reproductive abundance.
Yeah,
I don't even want to use the word success.
Differential
abundance.
Reproductive abundance.
And does it really work the way we're thinking? And we're finding experimentally and observationally what Darwin envisioned was really unnatural selection. It's not what actually happens naturally.
Yeah, no. What Darwin came up with is junk.
Yeah.
It's been refined somewhat, but
especially Lenski's experiment, not especially, but it is just poignant because long before Lenski we saw it, but he had that title and we covered it on this channel. The genome decays despite fitness gains. I'm just like, yeah, that says it all, Lenski. You're losing capability.
right.
It's fitness gains. I said that's exact opposite. And some people say, well, that's how selection works. You can lose in your gain. I'm like, no, sir. This is like saying you go in the casino, you can win and lose, but the net direction, you're leaving out where the net direction goes if you're an unskilled gambler.
Yep.
You guys just have, the evolutionary community has no sophistication in looking at their theory. It's like, you know, if you're losing this much and you just have a trivial gain here, this is like playing a slot machine where 90% of the time you're losing money and 10% you gain. You know, it's just not going to work long term. I'm just telling you that's where I'm at. I'm uncomfortable using. I use the word natural selection for historical reasons, but if I say natural selection, I said really this is Darwin's unnatural selection. The theory is disconnected from reality because what happens naturally is differential reproductive abundance. And you're like, what's that? It's like, that's exactly the problem. You know, the thing that makes the most makes the most.
Yeah, that's. If you said perhaps that the thing that makes the most contributes, even that's kind of a circularity. I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase that isn't circular.
Well, you know, that's exactly the problem. We ask what does it, you know, what does the theory actually say? And so we have the version in population genetics, and there are a couple versions of it, which ends up, even Lewontin said, he said in so many words, Santa Fe Bulletin, winter 2003, you know, it's not easy to say what selection is, neither is it easy, much less can we measure it. I'm like, that's kind of pathetic. You can't define it, you can't measure it. What kind of theory is that? And so, we can't say like Waddington, he said the most fit is the most reproductively successful. The ones who reproduce the most. And what he's saying is like the one that has reproduced the most, he's projecting into the future. It's like it will reproduce the most, and that's not true either. But then if you just give a true statement, then it's useless. Like the one that made the most was the one that made the most. It's just like that's kind of useless. Mm-hmm. It doesn't tell us the trajectory of what is possible or probable. And so that's where I'm at. So they'll say this natural selection exists. It's like, well, depends what you mean.
Yeah.
I would say differential reproductive abundance happens because you get more of something with certain traits in one generation versus the next. But
what does that? What's the meaning of that? Well,
yeah,
that's trivial.
Exactly. Is that a mechanism or is it an observation? I mean, it's certainly not a mechanism in terms of like what you define physics, because it's like, well, some traits will be more represented than others in the next generation, or there's a probability. I'm like, yeah, duh, So if you mean by natural selection differential reproductive abundance, it's like, well, yeah, that happens. If we mean by natural selection unnatural selection is the way Darwin envisioned, it's like, no, that's false. So it's either poorly defined or it's false. That's kind of where I'm at. And that, therefore, if I use the word, it'll only be for historical references. But if I want to be more accurate, I'll try to distinguish the flavors. Do we mean the population genetic sense, which is tautological, or do we mean in the Darwinian sense, which is just pure fantasy?
Yeah. I mean, I do.
Are you okay with that? I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Emery.
No, finish your sentence. That's fine.
Are you okay with that distinction? Just in case.
I'm okay with that distinction. I do think that. There is a environmental influence on which organisms will produce the most, but I don't think it's nearly as strong as as is claimed. I don't think it's single genetic. I don't think it's at the gene level. It's at the organismal level.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Let's take the neo-Darwinian model, which is really, genetic, Mendelian and so forth. Mm-hmm. It is hypothetically possible that there could be a change in the offspring that are basically carrying the. I don't know if are there clonal modes for animals or something. There must be clonal modes. Oh, definitely in plants.
Yeah, plants have lots of clonal options. Yeah.
And I will tell you that I've been growing things clonally, and the clones are they seem to track the environment. The plants look different. Now, not radically, but they seem to look different. And I think rightly so, we would conclude these must be some epigenetic, and I hate that word because it's so.
Oh, I know that word is a dumpster fire because it means nothing.
It means so many things. Yeah,
exactly. So it means nothing because nobody define the word. Sorry.
Well, it's had a sordid history. It first meant to be, inheritance above the genome, or maybe not even that, just inheritance in the somatic cells. And then it got to be chromatin modifications. Mm-hmm. and then now it's including all sorts of other things, and then just like it's I've seen so many competing definitions. I said it's unusable at this point, and we're not going to help matters by trying to redefine it. So when I'm talking about chromatin modifications, I don't even use the word epigenetic anymore, because it means too many different things to different people.
I've tried to move away from the word too, because it's just so. There are too many meanings. It can mean too many different things, and it's like a Marxist version of the dictionary. Like you can pick out whatever version of the word you want for the particular circumstance.
And brief Merry Christmas to you, Paleologos. Greetings. And so where were we? We're talking about, oh yeah, you're not convinced that it's not just, I kind of know where you're headed, and this is a nice distinction. It's a good thing to talk about it. In the standard neo-Darwinian population genetic models, you have just like trait A, B, C at a gene locus, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these alleles, and all you're doing is changing allele frequency. What kind of the modern view is, one, there are traits that are not genetic, that are inherited. That
Dr. Tapioca Weasel gave us an excellent example of that, the Dutch hunger winter, where the babies were born with a dramatic disposition toward hoarding calories. That's not a genetic trait. That's an epigenetic trait.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so that's actually an epigenetic trait, and it actually carries over for 2 or 3 generations thereafter. So kids who are alive now still carry the trait from the Germans starving the Dutch during the winter to try and stop the resistance.
You know what? That was in my epigenetics class. Actually, it was my chromatin modification class.
Chromatin modification, yep.
Now, someone gave a different interpretation. I had to credit him. I said, you got a point. So you have a mother,
mm-hmm.
and then she's pregnant,
mm-hmm.
and the baby girl. The baby girl's ovaries for the next generation are still under that influence.
Correct. That's true.
So hypothetically, you do have, it may or may not be an epigenetic inheritance, because they're all, all three exist, all three generations technically
simultaneously, because the baby has her fully developed eggs already.
Right. And I said that was a pretty insightful thing.
That's actually well thought out. The problem is it affected both sexes. It was not not exclusive to women.
Good. So the way that you can determine if it really was beyond that is if you go to 4 generations, and it's like, yeah, definitely. So if it goes beyond that, but so this one with the dramatic predisposition, you can't rule that out. That it was, basically the granddaughter was in that environment of the starving woman if she were pregnant at the time. Now, what would be interesting is if she's already better fed, mm-hmm. and then she gets pregnant, that adds a twist to it.
But the problem I have with that explanation, Sal, is it wasn't just women who were affected. It was male babies who were affected too, and male children who had kids with women who were not part of the starving winter. And my understanding is that they also had children with the predisposition toward caloric hoarding. I could be wrong about that. That this has been a while since I've reviewed this.
Well, let's suffice to say, I'm in full agreement that there are things that can be inherited non-genetically. You can have, we know that the sugar code is inherited non-genetically, and it can be modified across generations. So there are inheritable traits. So as far as the population model of just changing alleles, it's like, well, that's a very limited mechanical view, and it's now, it's wrong in the sense it's oversimplifying and therefore cannot cover all the cases. And we may be able to generate, based on the environment, kind of like quote unquote new traits or new characteristics that'll appear in the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about, I like, do we want to say it's continuous environmental tracking? I'm like, well, there's probably a term that might be less contentious, like developmental plasticity was kind of, I mean, there's got to be a way to phrase this that's not contentious, because if you just say that the next generation can be influenced, it can synthesize kind of traits that weren't latent in the parents, or something like that. There has to be a word to describe it, and then you wouldn't have something maybe so controversial, because then you could account for things like what you said. What was the name? What was the colloquial name for that bird you showed?
That's a Seychelles warbler.
Seychelles warbler.
Yes.
So for that Seychelles warbler, if you just describe what it is, where the mother can choose, then you don't have to. See, this is the thing that gets me, is why do we have to start writing all these classification schemes, and then we end up arguing over definitions, I don't know. Why I'm anal about this? Because I come from an environment that when you make a term, it is extremely well defined. There's no ambiguity.
Yeah, because you're playing in physics.
Yeah, that's my physics background. That's my math background. There's not. It's been kind of appalling to be dealing in the evolution.
Oh, I trust me. I know I read papers and I'm looking for like an equation or something, like, because I'm, for the purposes of teaching, it's a whole lot easier if you have an equation you can solve than it is for you to try and explain a bunch of concepts. Because if you have an equation you can solve, you can go, okay, this does this, this does that, and you can draw it out on a blackboard or whatever. You can't do that with concepts.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I just made Dr. Tapioca Weasel a mod because he was trying to drop a link. And Emery, congratulations on your graduation, and now you're also promoted to moderator. Yeah. I'm sorry to be so anal, but I come from an environment where we don't. First, I need to point out. Did you notice? And that's just a rhetorical question. Did you notice there's not a lot of debate about mathematics, elementary math? There's just not.
Sal, 2 + 2 is 5 now.
Yeah, up until the whatchamacallit, the white guy's math, or I don't know what it is, racist math or whatever.
Yeah, racist math or something like that, yeah.
And then for basic physics, there's not a lot of argument. And what I mean by basic, okay, we have the National Institutes of Standard that defines, what a standard of a kilogram is. So if you measure the mass of a relatively stable object, under certain conditions, you expect someone else to be able to reproduce it. There's not going to be argument. And so that's the thing that has bothered me in a lot of evolutionary literature. And then also, I'm sorry to have to say this, but with the continual environmental tracking, it seems like it is amorphous that you can describe all sorts of things as continuously environmental tracking. You can say it covers this or that, and really the thing that I think we're trying to say is this is not evolved. These are changes that are not that seem to be had foresight in its design to be able to give the next generation capabilities the parents did not have expressed, have not expressed those capabilities. So, like in somatic cells, you have the totipotent and then the pluripotent, and then it can differentiate. So definitely the stem cells have things that are not expressed that are then differentiated and expressed in the subsequent cell line generations. So in a sense, we have the capacity for differentiation. I think I feel better with that we have germline differentiation.
Well, the thing is with this particular one that I came out with, that's not germline differentiation because individual females can change that back and forth depending on the current environment. And so if the environment changes or they have to change territories for whatever reason, they can switch from one to the other.
Yeah.
So like they can go if they're in a good territory and they're making female babies. If the environment changes or they move territories, they'll switch.
Oh, well, thank you for pointing that out. So the question is, do we want to come up with categories and just say, okay, that classifies as CET?
And I mean, I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be okay with that. I'd be okay with saying, hey, that CET and this other thing over here is something else, or it's natural selection, or whatever you want to call it. Differential reproductive success, or whatever it is you particularly want to call it.
Yeah. Well, it's not a change in alleles, is it? What happened with these?
There's no allele change that goes on in this particular scenario. The only thing that happens is you have a difference in sex ratio. That's the only thing that'll change.
See, now we've actually used terms now that are a little bit more familiar, because we could either say this is an allele change frequency or it's not. That is actually pretty clear at that point, and you don't get any argument. You wouldn't get any argument from me, and I hate being such a stickler, but it just comes naturally because that's the discipline I came from. So if we say, okay, if it's not all about allele changes, then it's like, okay, we can come up with another term for it. We may have a variety of terms, or we may just put it under the cover of CET or whatever. And so,
yeah, I mean, the term continuous environmental tracking seems to fit what's going on with in this particular case.
Yeah.
Now, whether that will fit every other case, I don't know. I grabbed this case. I didn't go looking for this case. It literally fell into my lap at an airport. So I didn't exactly go looking for this. And frankly, I was pretty much on the other side. Like, I was sort of anti-C. I mean, I wasn't really completely anti, but I was kind of against it. I was kind of like, I don't know if this works. But when that fell into my lap, I'm like, okay, I gotta reassess, because I actually have something that might actually fit the paradigm.
So okay, I really appreciate the conversation, because this is my first real foray into it. And even though I had lunch with Dr. Galuza, we didn't talk about it much. He was really, really busy. He was so kind. And I was really spending a lot of time with Dr. Thomas, who also joined us for lunch. Actually, it was Dr. Galuza that joined Dr. Thomas and I for lunch. I'm sorry. So this is, when the next generation has something that has features that are not the result of a change in allele frequencies, then you have something there. Now, to what extent has the environment contributed to that, or was that a random change, or was it a non-random change? The way we do this mathematically is, if it is deterministic, meaning you do this, then this happens, then you could say that's non-random.
Right.
If you have a stochastic component, it starts to get a little funny. But you can say, okay, it'll be above random frequency, you could say, well, it would tend to be the environment would tend to have these outcomes at a higher, at a higher number above random. So it's a
the number is way above random. From the paper I read, they did, I think, 30 some pairs that they looked at. They 30 pairs of pairs. So they'd like 30 pairs here on one group and 30 pairs over here in bad territory. And the pairs in bad territory exclusively produced males. The pairs in good territory was like 60 or 70% females.
Yeah.
And then when they moved the pairs from bad territory to good territory, they about matched the ratio, mostly female.
Yeah. See, this is where I'm sorry that, again, it's my background, is that when we have a definition in math, it's not argued. We don't, we may not understand it, but if it's well stated at some point, like no one's going to disagree that this is what you're trying to say. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem I've had in these discussions is I'm getting cross-eyed trying to figure out is this a model of what you're describing or is it not? And I'm just like, this is so hard. And this is, we could argue this is what I see philosophers do. And I'm sorry to pick on philosophers. They'll come up with some.
I can't stand philosophers. Other than Danny. Danny, we'll give Danny a pass.
Well, the thing is, and to some degree, unfortunately, theologians, they'll come up with this ism or this ology, and like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, it's kind of good.
They don't know what they mean.
Yeah, but you see, it's kind of good that you don't know. It's not well defined, because then you're going to have an argument that is just perpetuated forever. That's one way to market the idea, right? Mm-hmm. It's just, people keep discussing it. Because like, there's no argument about math, there's just, and then it gets a little aggravating. It's like, okay, I've been listening to this discussion, like say, just like natural selection for 3-4 years. And it's been 5 years and they're like, oh, that's why I was having a problem. The definition is problematic depending on how you implement it. So you had the population genetic definition. And then in that you kind of have two. The one that was, Felsenstein called it a deviation from the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, which is like, wow, all right. It's like there in his book. Mm-hmm. And then you have these other definitions of natural selection. And then you have the Darwinian view, and then the way other evolutionists describe it. And like no one really agrees. And it's like, oh, that's why I was having so many problems.
Yeah. And I want to actually give you a huge thank you, Sal, because my introduction to natural selection being a little fuzzy was actually you. And I'd already been introduced to Galuza's CET model, and your lecture on fitness that you gave on a channel that shall not be named, is what got me interested in this. And I wrote an article and did a video on the topic. And then, which is how we ended up getting tag teamed, because I got I don't remember if it was an email or a comment or something from our I don't know, friendly enemy, Dapper Dinosaur.
Yeah, he's my friend. Okay, Merry Christmas, Dapper, if you're listening.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I have nothing against Dapper. Dapper and I have always gotten along well, but we're not on the same side. So I wasn't quite sure how to characterize him. But so, when Dapper wanted me to debate the topic, and I'm like, well, I don't know enough about this to debate it. So I effectively sent Sal an email and said, hey, can you crash course me on this? And that led to Sal and Dapper having a conversation about the topic, because Sal was the expert and I wasn't. And here we are. So, but yeah, you were my crash course in natural selection problems. That and the R.H. Brady paper.
Oh, goodness. And then I got published in the area. And then what else happened? And then I started to learn population genetics, and I was able to help you on your homework in population genetics. But yes. I'll tell you, the thing that is It says there's a proverb. It's one of my favorite pastors' favorite proverbs in the Old Testament. Where no oxen are, the stable is clean, but there's much strength in the ox.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just having to deal with a lot of doo-doo. And the strength of the work that I did on natural selection was clearing out the doo-doo. And that was disgusting. And it's like, did I have to do this? It's like, yeah, someone, I guess, has to deal with this doo-doo. And that was natural selection. It was filthy. It wasn't beautiful work. I'd rather be studying kind of like the biophysics and all the wondrous things like the Arctic tern, all its, all the clever ingenuity. And so it felt filthy. So, it's like, Emery, I spent 5 years of, maybe on and off 5 years, maybe more, maybe 10 years looking at natural selection and just realizing it was a mess to define, and it's wrong. And it was so amorphous in its definition. It was hard to, this is like trying to, take a rubber band and try to contain Jello and shape it. It just was so amorphous. And I was just attacking all the various definitions, and then like, oh, that's why there's a problem. For one, there are multiple ways, either explicit or implicit definitions. And once you can compartmentalize all the 5 definitions, then you attack all 5 and you find all the problems with them. So it's like, I have better things to do than clean up someone else's doo-doo, but that's what I was doing. And, and I hated going through population genetics. I'd rather do electromagnetic theory.
Good heavens, population genetics. I took a whole half, I guess that was sort of a course in population genetics. Ugh.
Oh, someone here, Ilyas Al-Muadi. Calamology. Let me look. Thank you for the offer. Calamology. Okay, so calamology, it says here, calamology reflects our approach and stylistic method utilized during interfaith discussion. This approach considers theology and philosophy as 2 facets of a single conversation, taking into account both the insights that are discovered by human reason and those that are only accessible to us as revealed in scripture and tradition.
He's a Muslim, Sal.
Oh. Are you a Muslim, Ilyas Al-Mahdi? I mean, thank you.
At least from the videos that I'm reading, he's a Muslim. Video titles, he's a Muslim.
Wow. Well, thank you for the offer. I haven't. Okay, so you're asking. I do know someone who's. I tell you what. Why don't I just say? Well, thank you for being honest. Maybe you can email me, evidenceandreasons@gmail.com. And I'll just leave it at that. If someone wants to hear, I'll talk. I've shown up on atheist channels and all sorts of hostile venues. I guess I'm that sort of person. Evidence and reasons. So, okay. Well, thank you for your interest in the channel. How did you find out? Well, tell me how you found the channel, but I want to get back to Emery here. We're talking about natural selection. So, yeah, I was cleaning up other people's doo-doo, and for me to like electromagnetic theory more than population genetics says a lot, because electromagnetic theory is hard. Population genetic theory just kind of goes into places that are just totally useless and all this mathematical theatrics, but I had to learn it enough to be able to criticize it. That's what was disgusting about the whole thing. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Basner, Cordova, Sanford, Hoster paper, that was a headache.
Yeah, I tried to read that paper. I emphasize tried. I understood parts of it. Probably the parts you wrote, Sal, because I know
Yes.
you write.
I just saw your private chat, Emery. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay.
Anyway, well, I do have a lot going on right now, but every now and then I do grant people a little time to try to talk. And so anyway, so why was I headed with this is that I'm feeling, and I hate saying this, I'm feeling like kind of coming, is continuous environmental tracking, is it a mechanism or is it just a categorization of a variety of mechanisms? If you're saying it's a categorization of a number of mechanisms, that's more tolerable. But, for like what I realized, natural selection isn't. It's so hard to define. I can't even say whether it's a mechanism or not because it's just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with continuous environmental tracking, the way you're describing it, it's like, well, okay, if you just want to describe it as things that are, it may cover some things that are results other than changes in allele frequency. It's like, okay, we can lump that together. If you want to call continuous environmental tracking as covering some of those cases, that's fine. And then you'll just say, okay, we're going to take a catalog of things and just say that's continuous environmental tracking. This is Shell's warbler or whatever. And if you want to do that, that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily then call it like a general principle like you would see in physics. That's what they tried to do.
I'm not sure there are any general principles in biology.
Yes, that's the other problem. I totally see that.
I think there's a whole bloody lot of exceptions for a bunch of very, very general rules.
Oh my goodness, you're one of the few. See,
I've been staring at that for the last couple of years and going, no. I mean, about the only general principle I can come up with in biology is like produces like. Yeah.
And there's some that are pretty close to being like universal, but not quite, would be like the central dogma of molecular biology, that DNA transcribes to RNA. The coding RNA is translated to proteins. And so principles like that.
I'm going to yes, but that, because it turns out you can go the other direction too.
Yeah, yes, but. Okay, so, but that's a lot better than say natural selection. It's a principle that,
I can give you an example. I can give you an example of how natural selection is supposed to work. But how it actually works in nature under natural conditions?
So, so where can I go with this? So, I mean, this is where I had a hard time criticizing, again, natural selection was the big target of the ID movement. And it was frustrating because this is like trying to shoot at Jell-O. You hit it and it just, it can still survive. And like, it didn't shatter. It's like trying to shoot water, Yeah. It's like, why wouldn't this thing break? And that's the problem with amorphous definitions. You can't use it for anything, but then you can't actually destroy it easily. I mean, that's what it felt like. So I'm like, okay, can I support or criticize CET? And I'm just like, I don't know what to do with it. for exactly what you said. It's hard to come with general laws of biology. Like, well, there are general things in biology, but let's call it like, say, are there laws of adaptation? I'm just like, oh goodness, we can't even define what adaptation means. So there is a big discussion, and Randy, Dr. Galuza is thankfully he's in a dialogue with the Discovery Institute over the question of what does adaptation mean. It's the engineering research group of the Discovery Institute that's really founded by a lot of people that weren't really originally part of the Discovery Institute, but then it got to be kind of important because there's so many engineers
Right.
in this. And they were bringing kind of the right mindset because they view adaptation differently. And Randy has an electrical engineering background. God bless him. And then he's a medical doctor and a pilot, just incredible. Harvard graduate, just incredibly talented. But the problem of definition is like I don't quite know how to handle it. So I would be curious to learn more. I mean, I definitely can see that if you wanted to say there are lots of things where the offspring have changes that are not due to changes in allele frequency. Yeah. And so like what you said, so changes in allele frequency are population level changes also. But you can have even individual changes that are not results of changes in allele frequency, as you're describing with the Shechel's.
Right, which is kind of where I'm going. I think I'm putting I'm essentially taking the two and melding them together, if you will.
Yeah. So I don't know if our discussion now is at all helpful to clarify. Well,
I think it was somewhat helpful for me because well, you know why that was somewhat helpful for me, but I think I would like to be able to quantify it mathematically, but I just don't see that happening in biology.
Sorry to laugh.
No. I'm somewhat laughing as well. Like I just don't see it happening in biology, terms of biology.
I'll tell you simply. This is the problem. How do you define something's adapted? It's on an individual case basis. And I've been trying to tell, when Dapper and Dinah and I were having the debate over something, again, that started with him challenging you, I said, look at the definition of fitness. He said, I like the definition where it's just reproductive success. And he said, Sal, do you have a definition of fitness or adaptation? I said, no, it's case specific. You can't come up with a generalization, not case of physics.
I'll just explain this very, very simply to you. For those listening, this is why fitness and adaptation are case specific. Gills do not help your fitness in the Sahara Desert.
Gills, say that again?
Gills do nothing to benefit your fitness in the Sahara Desert. But they're highly adaptive in the Mediterranean Sea.
Exactly. And from an engineering standpoint, it is the capability. It's the capability it confers. We call adaptedness. We don't even use that word in engineering that much. I mean, I'm sure. But we will say it has characteristics appropriate to operate in a given environment, and so like extending what you just said, a submarine does not have the characteristics that are appropriate to operate in a desert, and a desert car like a Jeep doesn't have the capabilities appropriate to operate in an undersea environment. And you can just keep extending this. So when I realized it's case specific, this is why it makes it so hard to come up with a general law of adaptation. And so if natural selection had failed in that area, to try to say continuous environmental tracking is another form of adaptation, I just get a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying it'll be adaptation, but I do think it's possible to explain certain things that selection does not using that particular mechanism.
Yeah, yes, and it may not be a mechanism. Maybe the way to look at it is it's a
may have been
category.
a term.
Yeah, it may be a term or a category.
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing that evolutionists. It's like, are you actually describing a mechanism, or you're just kind of doing a classification, and it's not really a mechanism? I mean, I just so I can classify. Engineers build this, and it got adapted in that environment, and so is that a mechanism? It's like, no, that's just an observation. It's not a mechanism.
Yeah.
So, but this is a good conversation to have because I love Randy, and I'm told that they've dedicated 2 years to do this, and then they might move on just because it's consuming a lot of resources at the ICR.
Right. Yeah.
And they're different philosophies. And I got I had to express my conscience as far as the direction of CRS, where they want to build creationist models, and I'm like, I want to build anti-evolution, anti-Big Bang, anti-whatever models, which are not really models; they're just criticisms of existing models.
Yeah.
And because it's, I don't know. I said it does seem kind of unwholesome trying to build your house by burning someone else's down. But I said that's been, I'm almost a pure anti-evolutionist. I'm not really, much of a model builder except saying there was a miracle at some point that gave a lot of capabilities, like fully formed organisms. I can't tell you what all the created kinds are, but there's certain architectures that just strike me as having been miraculous. And as a matter of principle, if the world is young, it would have to be evolved. I mean, it would not have enough time to evolve. It had to be created as a matter of principle. So, but I tell you what, I've learned more about continuous environmental tracking than I ever have.
I'm glad it was helpful to you in that sense. And again, for anybody from ICR, if you ever watch this stream and I've said something that is inappropriate, feel free to reach out and let me know. You've got my email address, so feel free to get in touch with me and let me know.
Oh, and see, we got, I really don't think natural selection is that all over the place, though.
Yeah, it is.
Wait till you argue with evolutionists long enough, and you'll see so many different. I mean, the way Dawkins looks at it, the way Joe Felsenstein looks at it, the way others.
Or just go back and listen to our mammoth read of the Brady paper.
R.H. Brady, yeah. So, yeah, this is one of the things that you think it looks so obvious, and it's obviously true until you decompose it. I mean, for one example, and there was a whole department on this. I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but maybe it needs beating because it's still alive in the hearts of evolutionists. But Michael Behe attacked Darwin from one angle. You can't select for what doesn't exist. Can't select for what doesn't exist. And that's one angle. Then there are the other angles with population genetics. Then there's the other angle with circular definitions of fitness. Any one of those, will be devastating to one definition of natural selection. But then there are all these subtleties. It's like it may be true in its own world, but it doesn't represent reality. It's decoupled from anything real, or at best, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So what if the thing that makes the most offspring make the most offspring? That doesn't, what R.H. Brady pointed out, that doesn't solve the fundamental problem of what evolution is claiming. And that would be like, say, the evolution of complexity, etc. He didn't use those words exactly, but that's exactly the problem. He said, what What are you trying to? You have to have a statement that can be falsified. The way it's as stated, and I like what he said. He used the German proverb. Um, it if a bird if a bird sits down on dung, or is on it. Yeah, if you see a bird on a dung pile, then the prediction is it could rain or it might not rain. And it's
Right.
like, well, that's true as stated. It may rain or may not rain, but it's a non-theory. It's um, it has no predictive value.
Right. It's true, but it's trivial. It means nothing.
Right. So whereas when you look at the equations of in physics, you could say if this condition is satisfied, this is the outcome for sure, which is really powerful. So like if you give a real simple example, if you have a north magnet and another north magnet, the poles facing, and you try to push them together, you get an opposite force. I mean, that's a very simple prediction, but it does it is, you have kind of an outcome based on the conditions that you can define quite well. And that is one of the problems with natural selection. But then the other thing that he pointed out is, okay, let's even hypothetically say you got some of your definitional problems ironed out. He didn't say that, but that was kind of like the underlying assumption. You can't select for what doesn't exist. And like, oh, that's kind of bad, because that's what you sort of need to make Darwinism work.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've learned more. I've taken up, well, we've had a big 2-hour party.
Yep.
And it's 1 a.m. This is mostly for me. Because it's just great hanging out with you. So we spent almost an hour backstage. It's 3 hours of me, Henry. So thank you for your time.
Oh, glad to.
Do you want to meet backstage in a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
And then I'll give you the last word for our viewers, and congratulations again. And if you'd like to close this in prayer, I'd be appreciative.
Sure. Yeah. No. Thank everybody. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for putting up with me on South Streams over the last couple of years. I guess my 2 cents to take away from this would be, evaluate everything carefully. Just because something conflicts with your preconceived notion of how the world works, evaluate it anyway with the same level of care that you'd evaluate anything else, and try to figure out what the truth actually is. So, that said, let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, I humbly come before you, praising and glorifying you, Lord, for the day you've given to us. Thank you for the opportunity we had to serve you today. Thank you for the time we've been able to spend with Sal tonight. Thank you for his friendship over the last couple of years and the great blessing that's been. Thank you, Lord, also for us being able to talk about some nerd topics and bore everybody who watched to death. And Lord, I pray that you will just help us all to have a good weekend this weekend, and so that we help us to sleep well tonight, so we can wake refreshed and ready to serve you tomorrow. I ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All right, everybody. Take care, and God bless you.
Good night, all.
Good night. Merry Christmas, too.
Yes, Merry Christmas.